The smell of fresh sawdust always makes me want to run. It's too clean, too quiet for a man like me. I stood there, just stood there. The air in the aisle felt thick. It was a Saturday morning, a hardware store, somewhere between the rows of lumber and the tall metal shelves holding thousands of identical screws. The store radio was playing some upbeat song from a decade ago. People were walking past me, families, guys in baseball caps comparing tools, normal people doing normal things on a perfectly normal weekend, and I was completely out of place. My jaw set, my shoulders tightened, muscle memory kicking in where it absolutely didn't belong. The uniform came off a long time ago, years ago, but something stayed on, something heavy and invisible that draped over me like a wet blanket. I was standing there staring at a box of nails, trying to remember how to breathe, trying to remember how to be a person, because for a very long time, I wasn't sure I was one anymore. I learned to hold it, the quiet, the pressure that sat quietly right behind my ribs. When you come back, people expect you to just step back into the stream of life. They expect you to just click back into place. But I'm a broken gear in a machine that doesn't want me anymore. I didn't fit anymore. I avoided crowds. I avoided the spaces between words where people expect you to smile, or laugh, or just be casually human. Because if I opened my mouth, if I really let the silence break, I was terrified of what would come out. I carried this deep, unvoiced shame, not necessarily for what the mission required, but for what I had to become to survive it. You don't come back whole. You just don't. I'm still out there, somewhere in the gray static of a radio call that never ended. And the part that made it back on that plane, it felt dangerous, like a frayed wire in a room full of water. I started to think of myself as something broken beyond repair, the kind that stands right in front of the bathroom mirror at 3 a.m. and doesn't recognize the eyes looking back. It's an unanswered question that plays on a loop. I see their faces in the nails, in the wood, frozen, quiet, while I'm just buying things for a house I don't feel at home in. That is the true weight. It's a debt you can never repay, no matter how quiet you stay. So you build a fortress out of that guilt. You lock the gates. You become hard, unreachable, the kind that sits at a kitchen table listening to the hum of the refrigerator, feeling completely severed from the rest of the world, the kind that pushes everyone away because he is convinced he will only destroy what he touches. And there I was, in the middle of aisle 7. The air shifted. A heavy cart rattled past me, too fast, the metal wheels grinding against the concrete floor. My back instinctively pressed toward the shelves. Scanning, always scanning, listening without knowing why. My shallow breath caught in my throat. The space around me felt like it was shrinking. The normal world was too loud, too fast, too unaware of how fragile everything actually is. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to drop the things I was holding and walk out into the cold parking lot. I wanted to disappear back into the quiet of my empty house where I belonged, where I couldn't ruin anything, where I didn't have to pretend I was still human, where the silence was at least familiar. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, just a little, just enough to remind me that it never fully leaves. It just changes shape. It waits its turn. I took a breath, a slow, measured breath. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to push the noise away, trying to push the feeling of being a monster back down into the dark vault inside my chest where I kept everything locked away. I told myself I was fine. Just grab the box. Walk to the register. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact. Don't let anyone see the crack in the armor. Don't let them see the ghost you are carrying. I reached out. My fingers brushed the cold cardboard. I was so consumed by the internal noise, so focused on keeping the walls up, so convinced that I was a hazard to everyone around me, a shadow walking among the living. I was ready to retreat, ready to go back to the isolation that felt like my only safe perimeter. And then, the heavy air broke, not with a sudden noise, not with a threat, but with a tiny voice that didn't belong in my world at all. "Mister?" The word hung in the air. I looked down. A little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old. He was standing near the edge of the aisle, wearing a faded red shirt. He had dropped something, a small brass hinge. It clattered against the concrete and rolled right to the edge of my boot. The world stopped moving. Nothing moved. My first instinct was to step back, to pull away, to let him pick it up and keep my distance, because I was dangerous. Because I was the thing that carried the dark. Monsters don't belong in the light of a Saturday morning. They don't interact with soft, unbroken things. I looked at the boy. He wasn't retreating. He wasn't scanning my face for a threat. He just looked at the hinge and then looked up at me. He was waiting. The room waited. Slowly, I bent down. My knees popped in the quiet. The fabric of my jacket pulled tight across my back. I reached out. My hand hovered over the concrete. My hand, scarred, calloused. A hand that had learned to hold things that end lives. A hand that knew the exact weight of a loaded rifle. I picked up the tiny brass hinge. It felt completely weightless. It was nothing. But holding it felt like lifting a mountain. I held it out to him. I didn't speak. I had forgotten how to make my voice sound gentle. So I just offered it in the open palm of my hand. The boy reached out. His small fingers brushed against my rough skin. Just a fleeting touch. The air shifted. He grabbed the hinge, looked right into my eyes and smiled. "Thanks," he said. Just like that. Simple. Ordinary. He turned around and ran back down the aisle, disappearing around the corner toward a man looking at paint cans. I stayed frozen, still kneeling on the cold floor. I waited for the panic. I waited for the heavy air to crush my chest again. But it didn't come. He didn't see a monster. He didn't see the dirt I left behind. He didn't see the ghosts I dragged into the store with me. He didn't see a man broken beyond repair. He just saw a guy in an aisle who handed him his dropped toy. He saw a human being. And for a second, just a fraction of a second, I allowed myself to see one too. I stood up, slowly. The pressure behind my ribs, it didn't disappear. It never fully disappears, but it cracked. Just a little. The unsaid things I had been holding for years suddenly felt less like a vault of horrors and more like a heavy coat I had simply forgotten to take off. A coat I wore to protect myself from a war that was already over. I walked to the register. I paid for my box of nails. The cashier handed me my receipt and told me to have a good weekend. "You too," I said. My voice was raspy, quiet, but it was there. It was the first time in a very long time that I spoke without feeling like I was pretending. I walked out through the sliding glass doors. The sunlight hit my face. It felt warm, not blinding, just warm. The drive home was quiet. The radio was off. I gripped the steering wheel, watching the road, feeling the steady rumble of the engine under my boots. Cars passed me. People going to soccer games. People going to lunch. The ordinary world was spinning right alongside me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was intruding on it. It didn't bring anyone back. The voices from that final frequency, they never stopped being loud. The guilt of surviving when others didn't, it remains. I became a weapon. Now I'm just a rusted blade in a kitchen drawer. I don't know how to be a tool for peace. I walked into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. I stood by the sink and looked out the window at the empty backyard. I am not healed. The memories are not resolved. They sit quietly in the back of my mind. I'm just a shadow trapped in a transmission that won't end. I am learning to live around it. I am learning that the space between words doesn't always have to be filled with dread. And maybe that's enough for now. Permission to continue. Permission to be present in an ordinary place, doing ordinary things, without apologizing for still breathing. The brotherhood doesn't end when the boots come off. We stood watch for each other over there. Now we have to stand watch for each other over here. In the quiet. In the living rooms and the hardware stores. We have to remind each other that if you're still looking for the exit while you're buying hardware, I know the feeling. We're still on the line, just in a different place. To the ones out there still holding their breath in the quiet. To the ones convinced that the uniform never truly came off. To the ones carrying the unspoken names of brothers who didn't make it back. You are not a monster, you are a witness. And you belong here.